So I'll put it to all of the panel. I'm interested to hear all of your thoughts on this. If you were given the opportunity to speak to government and influence the review of current approaches to secure SuDS, what one aspect would you ask them to consider, and what is it you would like to see change? One of you jump in.
Be controversial. Make it statutory, bring in Schedule 3. In local government, as a leading authority, we are on LFA planning, so I seem to tick a few boxes. Anything non-statutory is not funded. It's desirable, it's not essential. The spending pressures are absolutely massive. To see my colleague how many applications he's facing is frightening, you know, and I think it's not taken seriously unless it's made statutory, and it concerns me that elements of the housing lobby have fought against it. I think it's in their interest to do it, and I'd like to see it made statutory because I think it's far, far too important to be left as a desirable and not as an essential.
You are getting it statutory, aren't you? Schedule 3 in Wales?
We are, yeah. I was thinking about my colleagues in England as well.
Sure. Anyone else on the panel got a view on that?
I think in some respects, being a London borough, we're sort of lucky that we've got the London plan, which is much more stringent than other policies, sort of national policy. I mean, I barely ever refer to the non-statutory technical guidance at all. I don't look at national guidance very much at all. So perhaps at a national level, it will be useful looking towards what's happening in London. I mean, I can remember being very upset and annoyed when the whole sort of SAB issue just sort of fell by the wayside, and SuDS and drainage got taken into planning. But we've tried to make it work as best we can, and so that might be something to look at what's happened in London, maybe review what's happened so far. I mean, it certainly would be a good idea to do a review.
Excellent. To the floor, has anyone got any questions? Got a question at the back.
Graham Fairhurst, I'm chair of the SuDS Project Steering Group. It really follows on from the previous question and answers. I'm interested in the adoption issue on the scheme that we saw, the Landmark House scheme, but also generally in Hammersmith and Fulham. Clearly, requiring sustainable drainage also requires that it be sustainable for society and economically. In other words, there are it's long-term durable solution in terms of management. And I'm just interested in how those details have been handled. A detailed question is that there were a lot of underground structures in the Landmark House scheme and not too many surface features. And I was wondering if that was perhaps also reflected on the adoption issues and the difficulties there.
From the council's point of view, we don't seek to adopt SuDS that are being implemented as part of sort of private sector development. It's up to the developer to organise the maintenance of what's being installed. So as part of the SuDS maintenance details, we like to see information on who is going to be doing that maintenance. But the council doesn't adopt SuDS. I suppose there might be a time where there might be certain schemes that we might do that, depending on where it is, and if it makes sense for the council to adopt a SuDS scheme. But for the moment, it's not something that we're doing. So it's up to the developer to do that.
Have you got a view on that, Catherine?
Yes, so from the maintenance on Landmark House, because Eastern Oriental are the owner and the primary occupier, they are going to enter into a contract with someone. At this stage, we haven't got a set manufacturer, but it would be likely that it would be supplied through that manufacturer agreement on the maintenance plan. The reason we didn't use greater sort of like above ground things, the building height restriction is really, really stringent for the DLA, so there was no flexibility to implement anything at roof level other than the green roof. So it wasn't necessarily the maintenance that dictates that, it's that we didn't have any flexibility in that height.
Hello, Stephen Boxall from Regeneration X. I've seen around London a number of major highway improvements and public rail improvements that have been funded by the Mayor, but I haven't seen any which incorporate SuDS. So, do you know of any particular reason why not? And do you know of any examples around London where these public rail and highway improvements have incorporated SuDS schemes?
Well, certainly from Hammersmith and Fulham's point of view, they're not schemes that I've been directly involved in, but the slide that I put up with the sort of the montage of photos, a lot of those were highway schemes, and also we've implemented schemes on housing estates. I don't get involved in those projects, but I can see that George is itching to just say what we did at Hammersmith when he was promoting those schemes, so maybe he can add a comment as well.
Sorry, I will respond both as a previous Hammersmith and Fulham employee and also now working for the Mayor on trying to implement sustainable drainage. So the Mayor has provided funding in the past through Drain London. There's been half a dozen, if not more, flagship schemes, including Bridge at Joyce Square, which is placed up there in Hammersmith and Fulham, Derbyshire Street Pocket Park in Tower Hamlets, to name but a few. TfL are starting to incorporate it. You may be aware that they released their SuDS a guide recently, at the end of last year, and they've also, in their latest iteration of the Mayor's transport strategy, they're proposing a removal of 5 hectares each year to be drained to SuDS from the highway. So it's moving in the right direction. I agree that there's a lot of development that's probably going on as we speak, if not in the last couple of years, which doesn't incorporate as many SuDS as maybe we'd like. If we realise the timeframes involved to get these in motion, I'd say most of those probably went through planning or design a good 5 to 10 years ago. That's no excuse, and I think we need to be seeing more of it. Certainly Thames Water are pushing it more. The Mayor is putting their weight behind it. We have the London Sustainable Drainage Action Plan, which I'm employed to try and deliver, which is looking at a 25-year action plan to try and encourage retrofit across the scale, including those within TfL land and the like. So it's moving in the right direction, I hope. And I guess in Hammersmith and Fulham we believed we should practice as we preach. We can't be asking Rambo and their clients to deliver it if we can't do it ourselves. And we've learned so much from doing so that is kind of why the gentleman next to you, with regards to the 5 litres per second, that's why from doing it ourselves, we've learned that actually you can achieve certain things, and we understand why we can't ask for certain other things. So.
My name is Ned Mebrate from Causeway Technologies. We make drainage design and hydraulic analysis software. My question is regarding cost implication. Have you compared the original design to the revised version in terms of costing for the drainage?
Yes, it's more expensive. There are other cost savings, there were other things associated with the cost plan that came in that meant that original estimate was being slightly dramatic. But through the sort of ongoing collaboration and various workshops we had, both with the architect and things like that, the strategy, the drainage moved from being a sort of bolt-on, do it with the landscape kind of thing, to it moved to being more central to the project, and the cost and the budget associated with it moved in that direction also. They appreciate that this isn't optional, we needed to do something. But I say it's more expensive, but it does depend who you ask, but I think it will be marginally more expensive at the end of the day.
Roger Knowles, Sheffield City Council. It's a question about Greener Grange Town. I just want to know a little bit more about Welsh Water's involvement in terms of resourcing, both the actual scheme and the drivers that they saw and the benefits they saw out of the scheme, and then the issue of long-term management. Obviously this is a long-term benefit to them, taking flow out of the combined system. How's that recognised for Welsh Water?
The capital cost is about 2 million. They've contributed 50% of that up front. With the client in contract with the sole client as a local authority. So if it goes over, we have to pay it, not the partners. In relation to the surface water removal, they've got something called a Rainscape project, which is a multi-million pounds national project across Wales for removing surface water from combined network. Greener Grange Town has probably removed twice as much water per pound spent as their other projects. So they're quite interested in doing this work in urban areas, you know, at the bottom of the catchments to help, you know, time flow, time concentration, that sort of thing. They do have a very, very significant spend out of their AMP on surface water removal, and I know they're very, very keen to highlight this with customers, with Ofwat, with CC Water, to try and get a message across the importance of taking the pressure off the system, stopping the CSOs from operating, certainly cutting down the costs in terms of pumping and treatment. I think they spent about 40 million just internationally on developing these ideas, and we've advanced the technology they've used internationally to the next stage in Greener Grange Town. As I say, nothing to do with flooding, just surface water removal. So they see it as a long-term investment. You know, at the end of the day, these systems were built like in London 150, 170 years ago to get rid of typhoid and cholera. It was all combined, and across Western Europe, all the main cities have combined networks. They're up to their capacity. They have to meet the European Wastewater Directive standards for treatment. It's costing a horrendous amount of money to pump and treat this amount of water, and if we can remove that surface water, which is a vast proportion of the sewage in many urban areas, then you're dramatically removing the costs. And if you can, we're using grass and gravity to do what 3 pumping stations and 8 miles of sewers in a tertiary treatment plant does, and I think they've added that up, and it really pays for itself very, very quickly. And if you look at the multi-benefit costs, we've had ARB to look at that as well. It pays for itself extremely quickly, and I think people are educated about water. I think if you look in the last 10 years how much we've changed our attitudes in terms of recycling, and how people's behavioural change has come in terms of recycling materials. I think Wales used to be the lowest in the Western Europe at 4% 10 years ago, and now at 58% in Wales. We're saying in Europe people have changed their behavioural attitudes. I think Welsh Water and Cardiff wants people to change their behavioural attitudes towards water and how we manage water and see it as an asset, and that's where Welsh Water are going, and that's how the partnership works, because I emphasised previously we have the same customers, and it's important to collaborate when we're trying to benefit the same communities.
I mean, obviously it's successful. I'm just thinking about rolling this out on a wider scale, and in terms of your highways department and the maintenance of these features.
Yeah.
You know, it's a pilot, if you would like, at this stage, but the implication is potentially widespread new responsibilities, and it's just how that squares with the fact that it's actually benefiting Welsh Water. Yes, the community as well, in terms of it's an attractive environment, but fundamentally Welsh Water are benefiting in perpetuity for long term there.
They are, and I think they realise that, and that's why there's an element of community summers going towards maintenance by the Highway Authority, and the design is critical in terms of maintenance. You know, I can't emphasise the importance. We've talked to our colleagues about maintenance issue, and that's what kills SuDS. If it's hard to maintain, you won't maintain it. And I think where Welsh Water are going, I'm meeting with colleagues and a couple of the bosses next month to look at other opportunities in Cardiff. I think they're looking to remove something like 80,000 roof areas in Wales over the next AMP spend in terms of surface water removal. And from my perspective, obviously from Cardiff's perspective, I want them to do as much in Cardiff as possible, but I think our highway network puts more water into their sewer system than anything else combined in Wales. And so the more we work with them on highway networks and water removal, we look at our green open spaces, where can we intercept, attenuate, drip feed into a water course, to take the pressure off, to evapotranspirate. Everyone gains, and if we're dealing with the same customers, politically it's slightly easier for us because Welsh Water is a not-for-dividend company. It doesn't have shareholders. That was by accident rather than design when they created it. But I think by that process, politically, it makes it easier for councils and governments to work with them. And I think, from my perspective, I think that's an advantage.
So Ian, is there a phase 2, phase 3? Is there a rollout, or is...
Watch this space.
You'll come back and present that week?
Yeah.
Ken, it's a question for you. In terms of the work that you're doing, can I just ask, what was the biggest challenge and how did you overcome it? And what was the value of the integration that you had with Ian and his team?
Definitely the public, without a doubt. We didn't, but it wasn't in the bill really about public relations, and we actually put a public relations officer in there, and that helped no end. And I think that's the most important thing with schemes like this, that you really need to have included into the contract, that you need a public relations officer, because that saves so much time, it does, and working very closely with the client as it's going along. And like Ian wanted to make, we wanted to make changes or any changes, is working together. That's very, very important. And I know it has cost us money to put it in, but I think in the long run it has helped, definitely.
I have a question for Paul, and perhaps other people representing other councils in London and in the area. What's the local authorities' commitment to SuDS and sustainable development? I represent a company which provides engineering services to private sector developers, and I think I would like to maybe take a message from today. I can go back to my clients and say, well, is the challenge is not only on the private developers to comply with the SuDS regulations, but there's also some commitment from the local authorities, especially in areas like Hammersmith and Fulham, where this is significant issues with flooding and sewer capacity. I think it's just, can we share the pain? What's the plan to improve the situation?
Well, I think we could show our commitment. I think we've been showing our commitment over the last 2 or 3 years, just in terms of the projects that we're implementing ourselves, in terms of what we're doing in our own highways improvement projects, what we're doing on our own housing estates. We've got very good examples of SuDS on housing estates that have been winning awards, and often in telephone conversations that I'm having with people, I advise them to go, especially if they're sort of local consultants or architects, go down to one of our housing estates where SuDS has been implemented and take a look at what can be done in the borough. On the planning side, our commitment is shown, I think, by the fact that we are making our policies more and more stringent, trying to focus on getting the maximum benefits in terms of SuDS on all schemes. I mean, I focus today on major schemes in terms of that's where the lead local flood authority work is focused, but we have a planning policy that actually requires SuDS in all development, really. So we push SuDS in minor schemes as well. So that's, I'd say we're certainly committed as a council to getting more and more SuDS and good quality SuDS developed into the borough, and we will do that ourselves as well. We're continuing to do that, and we're continuing to look for options to go from. We're not happy with just putting improvements into one housing estate. We're looking to go on to the next one and the next one, so we will continue to do that.
I have a question about community engagement for all the panel. Obviously, our friends from Cardiff spoke a lot about community engagement, and I think Catherine said that there was engagement there as well. So I'm curious as to how easy it was to engage, and perhaps the difference in perspective between the two. London, as an outsider, would be notoriously difficult to engage with anything. I'd be interested to hear how you engaged and what tools you used and how that compared to Cardiff. Sorry.
So I wasn't directly involved with the actual engagement, but because Landmark, so it's the tower, the building that's there is already called Landmark House. Because those towers are such a negative landmark, we benefited from the fact that that site's been owned by 6 different people in the last 13 years. No one has ever put in a planning application. They've never got that far. We were the first people in those 13 years since it really was properly occupied that were committed to actually redeveloping this area, and the whole team were coming at it with the perspective that this is about creating a link through the site, creating that cultural space for the community. It was easy for the residents to buy into it. Some of the houses on Angel Walk have been owned by the same family for the entire time they've been built. So there are people there that the moment you stand on Angel Walk with a clipboard, someone will come out and ask what you're doing, and are you going to knock that tower down yet? And you know, we found out that that building had been underpinned because one of those residents came out and said, "Oh, did you know they underpinned that in 1983?" And we were there like, "Sure, mate, sure." And we found the drawings, we found the records, and he was about 2 months out on when it had been underpinned. So we were very, very lucky in that respect, that because it was easy to see the benefit that we were bringing, we didn't get that many objections. They weren't that pleased when it was 6 stories higher, but we've met in the middle with that. So win some, you lose some.
I've got a slightly different question for Cardiff. So we talked about your 12 streets that you've regenerated there and developed. I heard the displacement of commuter parking mentioned, I think someone said it. I'm assuming that went to one of the streets on the other side of the 12. So how did you engage with that community? How did that go?
I think a lot of it was social media. We use a lot of social media. The drop-in sessions are very good. We got them every week we have. Like I say, it's 40 odd we had. There was a lot of people turn up for them. And they had lots of questions, like Catherine was saying, you know, they were giving us information as well about being displaced traffic, you know, and yeah, they did, you know, we have had it come back, say that we dislocated people and things, but I think social media is definitely Twitter, and you've got to respond with Twitter. When they come back to you and have complaints, you've got to respond and don't leave it run on. And you find out as well that once they don't really start getting engaging until they start actually working in their street. And that's what they go. And we found the letter drop in, it did work to a certain amount, but it's sort of junk really, they don't really look at it, but it's face to face that they want is engagement.
Yeah, I still got the scars, and they're adding them on a weekly basis. I think some people, there's always a small minority, a vociferous minority, whose pint will be half empty or half full, and there's nothing you can do about that. The silent majority are generally accepting of what's going on. Because it's so close to the city centre, Cardiff city centre, I don't know, people know the place is being developed significantly in the middle at the moment. The BBC are building new offices, thousands and thousands of call centre jobs in the last 5 years. When they start there, they say, okay, we're not going to build a car park because we want to encourage sustainable transport. Well, when they go there, they give them a map saying this is where you can park for free, and show Grange Town, so you can go down there and park for free. That's the first street, you don't, no restrictions, go for it. And that doesn't help. And I think the design is deliberately squeezing out commuters and prioritising local residents. And I think some of the residents have seen the rain gardens as the problem. And since we've blocked off a couple of those temporarily to do some drainage works, people haven't been able to get in the area, and it's been local residents only, and all the commuters have been squeezed out. And the residents quite like that. I think there's a knock-on effect. You have to plan your zonal parking for residential parking in an urban area, but unfortunately in Cardiff at the moment probably the changes in employment are happening quicker than the parking changes, and it's a huge political problem. And I think in terms of planning, from my perspective, I'd like to see us put stronger messaging to the applications in the city centre, saying, look, you can't just displace people into communities. You have to take responsibility in terms of sustainable transport and how you get your employees in and out. I think that's the way of approaching it, because otherwise, you know, I think people won't walk that far and they'll start using transport. What they do is they park in the area, they get out their £1,000 foldable bike out of the back of the car and they cycle to work. You know, it's not really sustainable, is it? And I think we have to try and encourage people to think about alternative forms of transport where they work, because otherwise these communities turn into car parks.
Well, I've got one final question for all of the panel. I wondered if you could each give me 3 critical success factors that help deliver your project.
I think having, I'd say having clear policies so that people know what it is that you're trying to get in terms of your SuDS strategies. Being open about the advice that we give, and being available to meet and discuss and go through SuDS strategies rather than just sort of trying to just close things down or not being too helpful. I mean, occasionally I see planning application comments where people just sort of say they're objecting, but they don't really give any hints about what to do in order to get that objection overturned. And then my third one, then, I want to know, maybe be realistic about what can be achieved. I work in the field of environmental improvements and environmental planning, so I want the very best all the time, but sometimes the perfect scheme doesn't really exist, or it's not really out there. So sometimes you've got to be realistic about what you're trying to get on your sites.
First 2 in terms of Greener Grange Town, and I'll do a third one because I do this gentleman's job in Cardiff as well as a sideline. Firstly, I think it's about understanding each other organisations' priorities, respecting them, and that's where you build the trust, because trust is critical between the partners on the contract. The second is as we've mentioned several times, the constant communication and conversation with the residents. It's their home you're digging up. Respect them. And the third one, in terms of what my colleague said, in terms of planning sustainable drainage, it is about trying to get what's achievable. Greener Grange, some sort of nirvana SuDS in terms of what we're trying to achieve. Most schemes won't get that, so we'd ask them to start at the top and work your way down to what's achievable. Don't start at the bottom and work your way up. Start at the top and work your way down. I think that is a way of delivering SuDS.
One of the main things is to deliver what you expect. Don't sort of have your delivery up high and then you don't achieve it. Otherwise, once you sort of don't deliver what you say, you've lost the argument straight away. And like I say, keeping the workforce as well informed. That's what we find. If there's anything on site that needed, if there's an issue on site, we'd always keep the workforce and toolbox talks. That was the main thing, of course, keeping the public informed and the client. If any sort of changes in the design or any changes we've had, or I think we've always keep them informed. So it's just communication generally.
I'd say ambition. In my extensive career, I've seen there is a general change away from this 50% betterment attitude. More and more the new schemes we pick up, we're allowed to be more ambitious, we're allowed to achieve better schemes, which, 14 months ago wasn't happening. So, be ambitious, try and push what is going to be acceptable to the cost consultant, and then it's sort of banging on the same drum, but communication, involving every discipline in a multidisciplinary project is really important. There's nothing more annoying than missing an email about a coordination thing. Everything needs to be coordinated and collaborative. That's how things work now. And I guess those are my two other things. Collaboration and coordination. Everything is easier if you know where everything is.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Well, if there's no more questions, we'll start to wrap it up from there. So, 3 fantastic presentations, two great case studies. I think if I'm going to take anything away, it's about having a clear strategy for your SuDS scheme and being realistic with what you can deliver. But perhaps most importantly, engagement, early engagement for your stakeholders. and then communication, clear communication that everyone can understand right through. So I'll wrap it up there. If we could thank our speakers in the usual way.